What's going on, everyone? It is the Derf, and in today's video I am revisiting my version of the OG Strand Warlock Swarmers build and updating it to feature not only the new pulse rifle Strand exotic weapon Malpais, but also to reflect the recent update that gave us the last 2 rows of this season's artifact. Swarmers is in a really great place right now. Strand in general is in a really great place right now, regardless of class. And if you are a Warlock, or at least you like to dabble in Warlock, you're going to love this style of play, because not only are you going to be able to suspend everything on cue, you're going to be able to debuff every target and create tons of chaos on the battlefield. And that is what Strand is all about, debuffs and chaos. If you are a fan of Strand, this build is for you. Let's go. To get us started on our updated OG Strand Warlock build with our Swarmers, here we go. We got Needle Storm, Healing Rift, which is going to be important once we go through the armor and the stats, Burst Glide, Arcane Needle, and specifically for this build, we are going to be using the Grapple Grenade. Now, our main play here is to be creating as many tangles or threadlings, as possible, and I'll get to kind of what that means here in a second. For aspects, first up is Mind Spun Invocation. Your grapple has enhanced functionality, and what that means is your grapple melee spawns 3 threadling eggs, which means every grapple melee is essentially going to cause threadlings. So you're going to have an abundance of them once we go through the fragments. Next up is going to be the Wanderer. Tangles you throw attached to targets and detonate into a suspending burst. Destroying a tangle creates a suspending burst after a short delay. Threadling final blows create a tangle. So the key point here is our main goal is to create as many threadlings to create tangles and vice versa. I know that might sound kind of redundant, and I understand I'm not the first creator to come up with, these 2 aspect combinations or anything like that. But the thought process here is we're not using a grenade, so our playoff is to be using our grapple melee to create threadlings anyways, which are going to return to us if we end up clearing that group of enemies we use our grapple melee on. So then what do we have? We have our Arcane Needle to infect those around if we don't have threadlings, or in this case a threadling grenade to chuck from a distance. For fragments, first up is Thread of Warding. Picking up an orb of power grants us Woven Mail. This will double down once we get to the artifact and give us additional bonuses as well. Next up is going to be Thread of Transmutation. While you have Woven Mail, weapon final blows create a tangle. You'll notice that it doesn't say Strand weapon final blows. It's literally just weapon final blows. Next up, we have Thread of Fury. Damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy. That's going to be extremely important for getting our abilities back. And last but not least, we are going to go with Thread of Generation, which is dealing any damage generates grenade energy. Now, this is not the most chaotic way to make this fragment setup. If you want to get ridiculously nutty, you can substitute these 3 if you want, and you can throw on Thread of Finality for additional threadlings every finisher. You can also combine that with Thread of Evolution. Threadlings travel further and deal additional damage, and you can round that off with Thread of Rebirth. Now, this is only if you want to do everything via threadlings and don't really necessarily incorporate tangles. The problem with living like that is, number one, it's not really viable in higher end content. It's more of like a fun build, if you will. And then it doesn't pair as well with your aspects as you think it might. In other words, we don't have our Weaver's Call equipped, so we're still not going to be creating as many threadlings as we possibly could, if that makes sense. So just keep that in mind when you're creating the build, or maybe making some small changes to it for your own character. For stat distribution, I recommend speccing into weapons, grenade, and super in that order. Class ability doesn't matter really here because we're really only using our class ability to get our healing rift. We're not using it to generate Weaver's Call. And your melee isn't as important, but whatever stats you have left over or whatever mods you have left over, dump into melee so that you can try to get it to at least a 70. You don't really need it to be above a 70 if you really don't want to, but it is a little bit better because you get a little bit of additional energy back from all sources, and that stacks with Thread of Fury. Health is going to be talked about here in the armor. It is, at least for the way that I've got set up, this is not how I want my health to be when I'm working with a Strand OG Warlock, because we don't technically have a way to generate health other than our class ability, but we'll go through it, don't worry. For weapons setup, the new Malpais is absolutely ridiculous. Suspending Blast. Detonate a large number of rounds embedded into a single target, suspends them. That includes every champs. And as a benefit to that, when the barrier champs pop their bubble and you've got some rounds embedded in them, you can detonate the rounds with the bubble activated by the barrier champ and stun them thanks to the artifact. So in this case, these rounds are still classified as pulse rifle weapon damage. Atomizing rounds. Rounds fired embed themselves in targets. Long press to detonate embedded rounds. If you haven't messed around with this weapon yet, it is mint retrograde on, I won't say steroids, but it is definitely mint retrograde with a couple cherries on top for sure. But if you don't have this weapon yet, you can still use mint retrograde and this build will still work as we go through it. So if you don't have new Malpais, like I said, you can put on mint retrograde. I guess technically you could always put on a Quanillis, but it's not going to function as well because we need a backup DPS weapon. In the energy slot, I highly recommend getting yourself an Ahab Char with Heal Clip and Burning Ambition. But one of the other good weapons that is now back with the new revision is going to be the Mida mini tool. I've got Hip Fire and Incandescent on this. You see, I literally just picked this up. That's why it's got no kills. There's a number of combinations that would work really well, but your main goal is to cause as much scorching damage as possible. So either Incandescent or Burning Ambition would be plays here. Actually, someone can fact check me on that. I'm pretty sure that you can get Burning Ambition on the new Mida mini tool revision. But you guys can let me know in the comments. Either way, a way to generate Scorch, which will generate additional damage and also grant you Fire Sprites, which will, of course, will give you grenade energy. All those things will work together with both of these weapons. In the heavy slot, if you haven't picked up a copy of this new rocket launcher, this thing is pretty nice to use. Yes, I understand I only have one kill with it because I just got one that had auto-loading holster before this video was made, so I haven't had a chance to actually pair it into my build yet. My previous version did not have auto-loading holster. One of the best roles, in my opinion, for this is going to be auto-loading holster and elemental honing. Elemental honing, if you didn't hear, is kind of a broken perk right now. Dealing unique elemental damage grants this weapon a stacking damage bonus for an improved duration. The bonus is increased for kinetic weapons. So this is going to pair, obviously, because we are dealing strand damage all the time, basically. So elemental honing, on top of it already having strand damage behind it, is going to further the damage that you're going to be able to put out. And oh, by the way, you can put on Temporal Blast for the remainder of this season and just guarantee yourself at 5 charges, the weapon's next shot creates an explosive blast on impact that damages nearby combatants. It's just a nice rocket launcher to have. And you can also roll this with Ambitious Assassin, which is a nice perk, but I don't think it is going to replace auto-loading holster. Think of this like a strand version of like the Palmyra B. At least that's kind of how I have, but it hits way harder, obviously, because it's a featured weapon. So Swarmers is our featured exotic. You get a nice little damage resistance buff. Its main perk, destroying a tango spawns a threadling. Your threadlings unravel targets that they damage. And once you defeat unraveled targets, you will sometimes get a threadling and you will sometimes get an actual tangle, depending on if you have a cooldown active or not. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about how great Swarmers is. If this is your first time ever seeing a video of Swarmers, trust me, it's worth grinding to get a decent roll for. It's worth it, and Strand lovers everywhere will tell you Swarmers is their go-to, probably over any other armor in the game, because it's just so much nicer and easier to spec into. For the rest of the armor, go ahead and spec into whatever general armor mod that you need. I know you see that I've got a class mod down here after me saying that class doesn't really matter in this. I don't want to have super slow class ability regen because the rifts are a lot slower generating than, say, like the Phoenix Dive, if that makes sense. For the helmet, make sure you put on a special ammo finder. I don't often say put a special ammo finder on, but special ammo because your Malpais is absolutely ridiculous when it comes to damaging bosses and champs. So the more ammo you have, the better. Go ahead and throw on a harmonic siphon and a solar siphon to round it out. For the gauntlets, go ahead and put on 2 heavy-handed mods because we can spam our arcane needle if we so choose, and put on at least 1 focusing strike, or put on 2 focusing strikes and 1 heavy-handed, however you want to do it. Every time you cause damage with a powered melee attack, you gain class ability energy, which is really nice because you can get your healing rift back a little bit faster. Now, if you don't want that, I'll just go through it real quick. You can absolutely go through and put on an impact induction, and that will get you your grapple back faster, which of course translates into more grapple melees. For the chest armor, go ahead and put on 2 elemental resistance mods. And because we don't technically have a way to regenerate our health, I highly recommend putting on a health font. Is this normally something that people have on their characters? No. But Strand is the only, well, it's not the only class, but it's one of the harder classes to generate health from. And when you're speccing into abilities, sometimes, like me, your health kind of goes by the wayside. Now, health, in the grand scheme of things, really only has to do with flinch resistance and the amount of health you pick up on an orb pickup. However, having a health font boosts 1 orb of power pickup, boosts your health stat by 20 instantly. So I go from 15 to 35, which puts me in the same line as my class ability at its full cooldown. The health font is going to help you in higher endgame content because, unlike a prismatic version of this build, which I've already made and updated for you guys, the health font is going to do what the prismatic build does, which you can't really bank on, and that is generate your health, or at least cure, because we don't have a Phoenix Dive, for example, that cools down as fast. So the health font on an OG Strand class just makes sense because all you truly really get is damage resistance. But if your health is already low, once that damage resistance is exhausted, you're toast. So when you're using OG Strand builds for higher endgame content, make sure you let your health at least get a little bit of love, which isn't normal for a lot of my builds, because you guys know I like to play pretty aggressively in all the characters and builds that I make. For the legs, make sure you put on Innervation, Absolution, and Invigoration. You could make an argument to put on double Innervation so you get your grapple back faster, because again, that's the goal, is to get those grapple melees back as fast as possible, but it's not necessary. Get your abilities back faster without necessarily only having one ability ready constantly while the other 2 are suffering. For the class font, or the class item, make sure you put on a class font. 1 orb of power boosts your class stat by 20, and because it's a 1-minute cooldown, give or take, for your class ability when you're using a rift in general, having the ability to gain a little bit of energy back quicker is, in my opinion, worth it. Make sure you're putting on Reaper, so every time you use your class ability, you get an orb of power with a weapon final blow, and go ahead and round this out with either Outreach or Bomber. Outreach makes more sense because we have less ability energy regen for our melees, but if you put your Bomber on, that's fine too. One other thing I want to say about the ammo stat the armor stat distribution. There are tons of different ways to make this build work for you. But I find the best way to build a Strand character is to try to have as many balances in it as possible. Because again, you don't have things like health regeneration with the Strand class. So any ability that you have to be able to generate an orb of power will further your health back even better. So that's my little caveat. There's tons of ways to make this build. You can literally make this character a glass cannon and focus only on, melee and grenade and let the other ones go, or focus on weapons and super, let the other ones go. But you do want your abilities back because they're what's getting you your orbs of power besides your weapons. And because your health generally doesn't have a way to refresh itself without an orb pickup, it's best to try to have a balanced attack so you're never lacking in abilities. And B, if you have to use more than one ability on enemies, for example, that don't one-shot kill, you have the ability to do that, and whatever you get the kill with gives you that orb of power, if that makes sense, which means you get more health. So real quickly, we're going to go through the Implement of Curiosity, our season's artifact. As you know, the last 2 rows were finally unlocked, and we're going to take advantage of a couple of perks in there. In the first column, we're going to go with Anti-Barrier, Scout, and Pulse because of our new Malpais in our kinetic slot. Also, make sure you have your Overload Rapid Fire due to the Ahab char you're going to have in your energy slot. In the second column, we're going to take one of the new perks, Threadling Proliferation. Dealing strand weapon damage has a chance to spawn a Threadling. Defeating a strand debuff target increases this chance. Due to the fact that we are running an OG Strand build, the ability to spawn Threadlings is going to be through the roof, even more so than with the prismatic version by default. So make sure you have that equipped. Up here, you want to make sure you want to put on Tightly Woven. While Woven Mail is active, gain increased class ability and grenade stats. Yet another way we're going to get our abilities, well, 2 of the 3 abilities back. And of course, because of what we're using for our grenade, that's going to be even better because every time we use a charge melee, we spawn Threadling eggs. In the third column, make sure you put on Fever and Chill so that you can proc Radiant with rapid precision hits with your Ahab char. Come on down here and put on Refresh Threads so that you can generate ability energy to your least charge ability anytime that you pick up a Tangle. And one of the other updated perks we're going to take advantage of is Pack Tactics. Dealing damage with Threadlings increases Threadling damage. At maximum stacks, Threadlings stun unstoppable champions. Now this is going to pair beautifully with our exotic weapon because not only are we going to be able to stun unstoppable champions with our Threadlings, if you dump enough rounds of Malpais into an unstoppable champ and then detonate them, it causes a suspending burst. Therefore, you have 2 ways to suspend and stun unstoppable champs without actually having an unstoppable champion debuff weapon. In the fourth column, we're going to go with Elemental Coalescence. Defeating targets has a chance to create an elemental pickup, matching your equipped super. Adding to that the fact that you already have a fragment in your build that will help you generate tangles. This is going to further that regeneration, so to speak. Up here, I have Threaded Blast. Destroying a tangle with strand damage increases the radius and of the explosion and its damage. On top of our aspects and fragments generating tangles, now we have an increased blast damage or increased radius of the explosion and its damage as well. In the final column, you can go ahead and take on Radiant Shrapnel so that you can proc those scorching projectiles that float around the air. And as you'll see, once you start getting into this build, you're going to be proccing those a lot. Round out the artifact with Shield Crush. Shield Crush has been on pretty much every build that I've even attempted, much less create a video for this season. And it's served me very well and a lot of Guardians out there. I'd be shocked if people think that there's a different selection in this column that's better than Shield Crush as far as universal play and the ability buffs that you get by it as well. With our Woven Mail, we're going to get increased melee damage, and yes, that includes our grapple melee. If you were to switch this up, there's a couple of options you could use. And the only one you would probably want to switch out of would be Threaded Blast. The first is if you take Threaded Blast off, you could always throw on Flame, Fiber, and Freeze. If you do that, you have the ability to equip the Solar Strand Siphon and then an additional Harmonic Siphon, because remember, you're only going to have one energy left in your helmet. You could also throw on Cardar's Darkness. Because you're going to be debuffing everything with Strand, and because your main ad clear is going to be centered around Ahab Char or a solar weapon in general, you could theoretically double down on the damage that energy slot weapon does, because if you are in higher level content, chances are you might not one-shot kill much with just some simple Strand damage. You're going to have to compound that, and this is going to help you do that. Your other option would be Elemental Daze. Stunning a champion with an elemental weapon creates an elementally aligned explosion, applying a matching elemental debuff to them and nearby targets. For Strand, of course, that's going to be Sever. And for Solar, that, of course, is going to be Scorch. So those are three options you could use to switch it up. If you didn't want to throw on Threaded Blast, maybe you don't like the Tangle cooldown, which, believe me, I understand that. And that is so annoying because there really isn't a reason why you should have a Tangle cooldown. In higher end content, your Tangles aren't necessarily going to be a game changer to begin with. You're going to use the Tangles and the debuffs that your Unraveling rounds cause by your powered melee and things like that in general, but it's not going to be such a showstopper that, you know, if you were to not have as high of a cooldown for Tangle spawn, that's going to, you know, dramatically affect when you're going through a Grandmaster level or higher style of content play. But those are just some of the ways. You can let me know in the comments what you use and how you switch this up to better fit your style. But the way that I have it, it's pretty utilitarian, and I haven't been hurting for a little bit more power from my Orba power for my Strand weapons. So that's just something to kind of think about. I guess in a pinch, you could throw on Tangled Web, but in doing so, you're going to have to sacrifice Radiant Shrapnel and Shield Crush. And I just don't think, because of our aspects that we have, that doesn't really matter if our debuff target suspends nearby allies. It doesn't really matter because we're already doing that with Swarmers and Tangles and then our artifact on top of it. Or not our artifact, excuse me, our aspects on top of it. So one of the reasons I think you should try this build is, well, the first obvious reason is we've got all of the pieces to the puzzle, so to speak, for our artifact. And since we got some extra Strand love, what we had set up previously, while still plenty viable, is only going to be enhanced by the increased damage that you're going to get from Threadlings. We were kind of hinted that we were going to get some increased damage from the Strand class with the Warlock, but this solidifies it in the form of the Threadling. So add to that the Tangles, add to that the Suspending Burst, add to that the new Malpais, and add to that the fact that you can still generate solar projectiles that scorch with your Ahab Char as long as Radiant is procced. All these things are leading to Strand Warlock. I'm not going to use the term meta because I know how much people hate that term, but Strand Warlock is a very good endgame build to spec into. You have to be a little bit conscious of your health, so you can't be as reckless as you are with other builds. But it's still very viable, and that Strand Super is still one of the best in the game. And oh, by the way, in case for some reason you couldn't put two and two together, your Strand Super spawns Threadlings. So where do the Threadlings go when they have nowhere to go? On your hip. What are you going to do when you deal weapon damage and all that other stuff? Oh, and do your grapple melees? You're going to spawn those Threadlings. So anytime you're in an ad dense activity, or in my case, where you're kind of in that tweener stage where the enemies are plenty aggressive, you're able to still mow through them until you get to like the conquest stuff or sometimes pinnacle stuff. But either way, there's really no reason to not try to update your Strand build with something that's, in my opinion, balanced. But like I said, you can customize this however you want. The way that I have it set up, though, I think most of you are going to really like it, especially those who know kind of my play style and kind of play the same way. So if you did find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a Guardian out there who is looking for a new or at least updated OG Strand Warlock build, feel free to share this video with them or send them my way. My goal is to help as many people as possible. As always, I will have a dim link in the video description. And if by chance you are looking for a non-toxic gaming community, I highly recommend you hop into my Discord. People are still on the power grind, of course, now with the increase in the power level cap and all the new things that were added to the portal, which is kind of a lot, especially in the Conquest tab. There's a lot to be done, and a lot of it you do probably want some friends to pal around with, even if it's just to get those few things done that you're having trouble with and move on. That is totally fine too. It's all about community. It's all about Guardians helping Guardians, having a good time, keeping it light, not being super serious or super sweaty. And of course, teaching if you need help getting through things. We have some members who, you know, they struggle with the harder content. No big deal. That's what the community is there for, to try to help get everyone on the same level. And that's what makes it a great non-toxic community. So shout out to my Discord members. I wouldn't be able to promote my Discord channel if it wasn't for you, because I mean, all I'm doing is offering the community. It's the members that make the community the really good home that it is. There's a lot of great people in there. So I'm going to switch over to the boss battle and wrap this thing up. So Swarmers has always been a Warlock fan favorite. I don't think there's anything, in my opinion, that even comes close to Swarmers, just in the utilitarian nature that it is designed to be. However, with this seasonal artifact now fully expanded, now we get a couple of extra things to pair with our favorite Swarmer style of play. Endless green buddies, debuffs, tangles, and like I said, green buddies, threadlings, is now just all the more sweeter. And oh, by the way, if that wasn't enough, having the Malpais as a backup DPS weapon, I mean, there is a lot to love and very little to be desired, you know, to go along with Strand. I guess there could be one extra thing for Strand, maybe some extra ways to increase your health, but we have that covered within the armor by itself on any kind of build. So what that leaves us with is just an absolute torrential downpour of green on the screen, depending on the activity. And you can see this boss battle isn't exactly the most busiest, you know, type of play, but it is a good way to test a lot of the builds that you might be testing, and Swarmers is no different. You can see I've basically never run out of any of the ability energy this entire match, and not only that, but that is how it is even in busy activities. Thinking about, you know, the endless waves of the onslaughts and things like that. So Strand is just in a really great place, and those who love Strand already know how powerful it is, and the Season's Artifact, the new Malpais, is making it even better. So hopefully you guys liked the video. I will see you guys next time. Take care.